Everybody, welcome into another edition of To The Point here on a Friday heading into the weekend. Hope you're all doing well. Bunch of different stories to jump into today. Some from the baseball world, MMA, some CFL history made last night, some history on the verge at Wimbledon, a big NFL signing yesterday, and some NFL news that's going to start to trickle in on Monday when it comes to the franchise tag and different players who will be looking for long-term contracts and could be potentially holding out into next season. So that's all on tap today. Before we get to that, I went to see Mission Impossible last night. Good movie. I recommend it. Some of the action scenes with Tom Cruise are incredible. What he does, Haley Atwell is the main co-star in the movie. I never seen her in anything, and I looked her up after, and she's in Marvel stuff. So that's why stay away from that crap. But the story's interesting. They have some really good actors that they brought on board. The action scenes are fun. It's almost 3 hours, but it's a very good movie. It was my first time I was in a movie theater in over 3 years. And I missed it. It was nice to be in a movie theater. It was just sit down, big screen. I recommend going to see this movie in a theater because of the sounds, because of some of the stuff they do with the film that are just more interesting in a theater. But it was a very, very good movie. Really enjoyable. Acting's good. The action scenes are good. Plot is interesting. And there's going to be a part two. But this is kind of a return to the movies. I know a lot of people went to see Tom Cruise's other vehicle, which was the Top Gun Maverick. So that was the return to theaters. But you have this movie this week. And then next week, there's the Barbie movie that's coming out. That seems to be a big rage. And also Oppenheimer, the new Christopher Nolan film starring Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr., which looks awesome. But I will say I enjoyed Mission Impossible. It was very good. Go see it. Go to the theater and see it. It's worth the watch in theaters. Yeah, fun movie. Enjoyed it. Way to go, Tom Cruise. He's not my favorite person in the world. I think he's a little crazy here and there, but aren't we all? But he knows how to do this role, this genre of film, right in his wheelhouse, and he's made another solid movie. I don't know. Fallout was really good because I watched 4, 5, and 6 this week. I've watched like 4 Mission Impossible movies in 5 days, which is a lot. But Fallout was very, very good. That was the best of the last 3 prior to this one. This one was right up there. Really, really a solid movie. So go get out to the theater and see it. Let's pivot to the UFC. It's going to open today's show with the super fight announcement between Francis Ngannou and Tyson Fury. But to me, there's bigger news to discuss. Last night, late about midnight, it was unveiled via Twitter that the UFC Light Heavyweight champion, Jamahal Hill, had suffered a torn Achilles and that he was relinquishing his championship effective immediately and making the title vacant for the second time in 6 months. He won the title back in January against Glover Teixeira. The title was vacant after Yuri Prohaska suffered a serious shoulder injury. And now the title that's been up in the air, that's been anybody's game since John Jones moved to heavyweight, since John Jones gave up the belt, is up for grabs again. And the question is, what does the promotion do with the title? There's a fight in 2 weeks in Salt Lake City, Utah, one of my favorite places, as you all know, between Alex Pereira and Jan Blachowicz. Blachowicz is a former light heavyweight champion. Pereira is the former champion at 185 pounds, middleweight. It's the co-main on that card. This could be a title fight. Two guys that have held gold in the UFC. Blachowicz was in a title fight in December, but ultimately it was ruled a majority draw against Magomed Ankalaev. So the UFC could go with this fight. It wouldn't bother me. Both guys are very good fighters. It's an interesting style matchup. 15 days is a lot to tell them, okay, you're going for 25 minutes. But to be fair, Blachowicz's last 3 fights have all been 25 minutes, and Pereira's last 2 fights have been 25 minutes as well. So they both are capable of training to fight for 25 minutes. If the UFC doesn't want to go this route, to me, we haven't seen Ankalaev fight since December. He won that fight against Jan Blachowicz, in my opinion. It shouldn't have been a draw. That's not the way to score the fight. And to me, he should have been the light heavyweight champion. So you book him in a fight against the returning champion, Jiří Procházka. When is Procházka returning? That's the question. When is he going to be healthy? And when does the UFC want to book this? When does the UFC want to book the light heavyweight? Is it something pertinent? Is it what do they want to do? If they want a champion right away, they'll book this fight in 2 weeks, and they'll book that as a title fight in Utah. If not, Boston is booked. Do they put it as a second title fight in Sydney? Potentially, but is Procházka ready to fight in September? Not a whole lot of updates on him when it comes to his health. Abu Dhabi doesn't seem like it makes a whole lot of sense. I guess you could put Ankalaev, a Dagestani fighter, in Abu Dhabi. That could be the co-main title fight with Procházka in Abu Dhabi. To me, that's the 2 options. You either go Blachowicz Pereira in 2 weeks for the belt, and then you have Procházka waiting the wings, so we'll get even more recovery time. Because if that fight happens in late July, the earliest they go, maybe December, November, maybe. I don't think they'll turn it around any quicker than that. So if the winner of this fight will be a number 1 contender, do they fight Procházka for the belt? But Ankalaev is waiting in the wings. I feel he deserves a crack at the title. I mean, he's beaten a lot of the top contenders. So the UFC has options. They do. It's just what they want to do with it. Just the Procházka element of this, not knowing when he's going to be healthy, would worry me. But looking at this, number 1 ranked currently is Procházka. Then you have Ankalaev, Blachowicz, Rakic, who hasn't fought in a long time. Johnny Walker beat Anthony Smith a few months ago. He's on the rise. I'm sure Johnny Walker wants to get his foot in the door. I'm sure he'd love a title opportunity. The last time the UFC had this predicament They booked the title fight right away because they wanted a new champion. They did not want it to be vacant. And I think if they pitch this to Alex Pereira or to Jan Blachowicz, I think both guys are signing up for a title fight. They're both saying, yes, we'll go 25 minutes because we have the opportunity to be champion, to make more money, to have that history. This would be Jan Blachowicz' second light heavyweight title reign in the UFC. Would be Pereira winning middleweight and 205 belts. That's history right there. 2 different weight classes as champion. And his only loss in the UFC is to Israel Adesanya, which there's no shame in that. So to me, does he deserve it? I'm fine with either. Be better if it was Pereira versus Ankalaev, but beggars can't be choosers here. If I had to guess what Dana White and the crew decide to do with the UFC, I don't think this will be a title fight because I think they want Prochazka to fight this year for a belt. He never lost it. He relinquished the belt like Jamahal Hill, and he'll get the opportunity to fight for it, to fight to win it back. And to me, the best fight to make, because you have these 2 booked, is him fighting Ankalaev. Because to me, Ankalaev is, other than Prochazka, the best light heavyweight on the planet. In the UFC anyway. There's some good ones in other promotions. But that would be a great fight. If you could put Islam versus, who knows, maybe Volkanovski, maybe Charles in Abu Dhabi, Poirier, Gaethje. If that's the main event, you have the co-main, you have a light heavyweight title between Yuri Prochazka and Magomed Ankalaev. It's a pretty damn good co-main event in Abu Dhabi. I know they want to have the Wolf, Khamzat Chimaev, on the card, but you can still have him on the card. He can be the third man up. He can be the third fight on the main card against Jared Cannonier, if that's the way they want to go, at middleweight. So a number of these, what they're doing, at least it'll be, and I see in the comments, at least it'll be better main event than the BMF. Yeah, it would be. But I still don't think the UFC will move. I think the BMF will still be the main event. Because more people are clamoring to see Dustin versus Justin. It's not about the BMF. The BMF is a prop. It's a gimmick. But those 2 fighting is a main event. They're training for 25 minutes. It's gonna be 25 minutes. And their first fight in 2018 was so fantastic that it's not going to be bumped. It's not going to become the co-main event, which is another reason why the UFC might decide not to do anything with this card. Why they might not make it a title fight, because I don't think they want to have that. People, whether Dana White cares or not, which he always says he doesn't, there will be fans who will complain that an actual title is a co-main to a made-up prop, the BMF, in the main event. Where I think UFC 291, it's a stacked card. It's like 290. I mean, the pay-per-views this summer are banger after banger after banger. We can complain about the card this weekend. It's not good at the Apex, and I hate everything at the Apex. Apex is junk. It shouldn't happen anymore. There's no pandemic. There's no mask. This shit is over. But I don't think there'll be a change is because there's logistics there that make it complicated. And if you can put Prochazka and Ankalaev fighting in Abu Dhabi, and you have a Dagestani fighter in your co-main event, and you have a Dagestani fighter in your main event, That makes more sense to me, and I think it's better because that's what the UFC wants to do. They go to Britain, you get the Brits. Tom Aspinall is in the main event. That's fine. Then you look who's in the co-main event slot. It's Paddy Pimblett's friend, Molly McCann. She's coming off a brutal loss to Erin Blanchfield. She's not a co-main event fighter, but she's from England, so that's what you do. You pigeonhole these things. In France, they got guys, they have French fighters going over. In Singapore, in late August, you have these fighters from the area that you put in the card to promote it, to get ticket sales. To me, the light heavyweight title would make perfect sense because Prohaska, he vacated that belt November, I believe. It was right before, because Ankalaev and Blachowicz fought in December. It was the last pay-per-view of 2022. So it would have to have been before that. It might have been October, but it was in and around that timeline. So if he got rid of it October, November, and he doesn't fight until the end of October, which is when the card in Abu Dhabi is, UFC 294, he, in a perfect world, should be healed. Should be ready to fight. And I see it's not about the country for Abu Dhabi, it's about being Muslim. Exactly. That's you're 100% right, and that's the point I'm trying to reiterate here. It's having Muslim fighters, having Dagestani fighters, and again, having a pop in your crowd excited to see guys. And Prohaska is a really good fighter. And he would be a good villain in this fight, I think. Now, the build-up probably wouldn't be great for that fight because neither guy speaks great English. So it's not, when it comes to interest internationally. But for the region, it sells. It 100% sells. I feel bad for Jamahal Hill. It was a great moment when he won the title in Brazil. He dominated Glover Teixeira. It was a great moment. He talked about on the MMA Hour, working at a hardware store and putting in time. And he had achieved his dream. But, injuries happen, and he'll be back. He's only lost one time in his UFC career. Jamahal Hill is a very good fighter. A very good fighter. But if I'm the UFC, I don't rush for a title fight this weekend. I book it in October in Abu Dhabi, Magomed Ankalaev and Yuri Prohaska. It's a hell of a fight. It's a fun build. But if they want a champion right away, Pereira, Blachowicz, that's great too. And that will get a big pop. But to me, you don't need it on this card. The card in 2 weeks in Salt Lake City is great. It's a stacked event. There's some great fights. You don't need another title fight to sell this. It doesn't hurt. But to me, you have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fighting on the prelims. You have Derek Lewis on the prelims. You have Tony Ferguson on this card. This card just reeks of a really good event. Who do you think will be winning between Jan and Alex? That's a great question. It's hard to go against Alex because I think his striking is second to none. And I think he's so big with his stance and the way that he throws kicks. In particular, the Adesanya, the first title fight, Izzy's leg was a big reason why he lost that fight. Yes, Alex hit him on the chin and he fell, but that leg was giving out. He didn't have a whole lot of power on it, and then the ref jumped in to signal it. Now, Jan has been a 205er for a long time. He knows what it's like to fight at that weight class. But Pereira won't have to cut as much weight as he does. I mean, at 185, he was cutting over 50 pounds. He was walking around 230, 240 pounds fighting at 185. So just to get down to 205 is a huge difference for Alex. I think Blachowicz lost to Ankalaev in December. And Ankalaev is a very different fighter from Alex Pereira. Alex is much more structural based. Ankalaev can get you to the ground. He has different ways that he can submit you with his grappling techniques. And I think Jan is a good fighter. He's tricky. He used, back when he was younger, he used to have really good knockout power like Alex. But if I had to go with a guy if I had to make a pick today, I'm going with Alex. I'm going with Alex because I just think the power, his ability to, I think Izzy's got more power in those hands than people give him credit for. He knocked out Whitaker. He had the ability to knock out Kelvin Gastelum, who's as tough as they come, formerly at 185. Yes, he didn't knock out Cannonier, and he hadn't, he had gone through a stretch of fighters where he was just winning. And it was kind of like Volkanovski, and it's boring. You just see the guy win. But seeing him knock out Alex the way he did, it signals to me this guy is the real deal. I don't think Jan presents that threat. Alex's biggest thing will be staying on his feet. What is his takedown defense? How has he improved his wrestling? If he is put on the ground in this fight, which I think he will be eventually, how does he prepare for it? Does he panic? We see he's worked out with Sean Strickland. That's great, but Sean Strickland is a boxer. Sean Strickland is not get you on the ground, get you in a choke and beat you that way. Now, I see Pereira's working out with Dylan Dennis, which is more worrisome than anything else because Dylan hasn't fought since ever. But I'm going to go with Alex Pereira because I think he's just too fundamentally good when on his feet, just the way his striking ability and everything that he brings to the table is really, it's a phenomenal blend of a fighter. But I feel it's too bad for Jamahal Hill. Jamahal Hill is a good fighter. So we'll see, but I think they have multiple ways they can go with this. Whether it's a title fight or not in 2 weeks in Salt Lake, that fight is incredibly interesting. It's two former champions in the cage with one another. Alex Pereira's introduction to 205 pounds. I love it. The UFC, I mentioned the UFC card this weekend. It's not strong. It's at the Apex. Holly Holm is in another main event. And I see this online. Why they put Holly Holm in main events? I'll tell you why they put Holly Holm in main events. She'll fight at the Apex without complaining. She does every time. And she can go 5 rounds. She loves going 5 rounds. She's been doing it her whole career. So you see people that are like, oh, this is my last fight at the Apex. I don't want to do this again. Kevin Lee, who just retired. Why am I fighting here? Like Terrence McKinney this weekend is fighting he shouldn't be. Terrence McKinney is a star. Like just in his personality, his fighting style. He should have fans to see him fight, but he's at the Apex coming off a loss to Ismail Bonfim. But Holly Holm is a former champion. She fights 5 rounds. And it's hard to sell this card. I'm excited to see Jack Della Maddalena fight in the co-main. That's where he should be. He was on the prelims before, which was just offensive. But he gets a fight finally after missing out on 2 different fighters on International Fight Week. But how can I sell this? Well, here's how I'm going to sell it. Holly Holm against Buena Silva. If Holly Holm wins the fight this weekend, I would book her against Juliana Pena for the vacant bantamweight title. If I'm the UFC, you have options. To me, Juliana Pena is going to be in the next title fight, guaranteed. She's got the flair, she's got the publicity, people hate her, she's a heel. Great. She can sell. She can sell a fight whether you like her or you don't. And sometimes it's better to be a heel to sell fights. Look at Conor McGregor, look at Floyd Mayweather, go down the line. So Juliana Pena's in the fight. Who does she fight? Raquel Pennington? Okay, well, we've seen Raquel Pennington fight against Amanda Nunes a while back. She didn't win that fight. Wasn't competitive. Is Raquel Pennington a personality? Is Raquel Pennington... And I think the UFC has a problem with marketing women in particular. But is that interesting? Do people care about that fight? No. Holly Holm is number 3. Holly Holm is a former champion, and she has name value. She might not be a big personality. She isn't. But she at least has name value. She's won her last couple fights. She's beaten Irene Aldana, who just fought Nunes. She's beaten Raquel Pennington, to be fair. But Juliana Pena against Holly Holm compared to Juliana Pena against Raquel Pennington, there's a more interesting fight there. And it's Holly Holm and Juliana Pena. Holly fights this weekend. She fights Juliana before the year's over. The December card at T-Mobile? Maybe. That's the place you do it. It's not asking Erin Blanchfield to move up is not the way to go. The women's strawweight division is really good right now. Really good, in my opinion. They got some excellent fighters. Sorry, women's flyweight. It's like you have with Shevchenko, Grasso, Manafaro. Now in a crazy turn of events, Thug Rose, Tyler Santos, Jessica Andrade, Lauren Murphy, Macy Barber, who's on the rise, Amanda Ribas, King Casey O'Neill, Yasmin Yazudevicius, the pride of Canada. There are some interesting fighters here. But you need to find a fight to reinvigorate that division. And Juliana is the A side of whoever's in that fight. Certainly. But if Holly Holm wins this weekend, she jumps Raquel Pennington for me, because who cares about Raquel Pennington? Raquel Pennington, weighed-in's the backup fighter. I don't care. That doesn't mean you get a title opportunity right away. Colby Covington's going to get one. Doesn't make it right. And Juliana and Holly are good grapplers. I think it's an interesting style matchup. Holly Holm's kind of a gatekeeper of the division. So does it make it more interesting for Holly Holm versus Buena Silva Saturday night? Maybe not. To sell this weekend, it's to see Terrence McKinney fight. It's to see Jack Della Maddalena. But also, what does it do for the future when it comes to Holly Holm and the women's bantamweight division? To me, the third fight in the card, the Francisco Prada, Otman Adzar fight, fun one. Chelsea Chandler, Norma Dumont, another interesting fight. Two women that have been very successful in their MMA careers. But it's not a stacked card by any means. We have to wait for Utah, because really the card next weekend in England is better, but not that much better, as I documented earlier. But to me, that would be the fight I make, because it's more interesting than Holly Holm and then Raquel Pennington and Juliana Pena, to me. Other fight news. See in the comments, I don't know why, but I want Alex to knock out Izzy at 205 and shoot that bow and arrow back to him. That would be fun. And the fun thing about Alex at 205 is I think Izzy will move up and fight him eventually. And that's about as good as 205 as a fight you're going to get, other than if you could see Izzy and John Jones. And that's not going to fight anymore. That's not going to happen anymore with John at heavyweight. But I to me, if Izzy say beats Dricus in September, and then Alex wins in July and he wins the title middle of next year. 2024, do we have an Izzy, Alex 5 fight? Probably. At 205 pounds. Because there won't be anybody else for Izzy to fight. And that would be a fun challenge for him to become a double champ. To join the likes of Conor McGregor and Daniel Cormier. The greats of the greats. Other fight news. The Francis Ngannou saga is over. If you're not familiar with this, Francis Ngannou's contract ran out with UFC in January. He became a free agent and he left the promotion. They were negotiating with him. They wanted him to fight John Jones. He wanted more things in his contract. He wanted more freedom. He wanted to have the ability to go box and to start a union and start some guaranteed money for his opponents in every one of his fights. And the UFC were unwilling to meet his demands. So he left the UFC. In March, April, around there, we learned that Francis was going to the PFL, one of the main competitors of the UFC. He would be joining their heavyweight division. He was working on PFL Africa on the board, and he would be fighting on their pay-per-views starting in 2024. But he also had the ability to find a boxing match for 2023 before he started with the PFL. So we kept waiting. What's he going to do? Is Francis going to fumble the bag? Is there something out there for him? We thought he might fight Deontay Wilder as they got face-to-face at the PFL event in Atlanta. But no, sounds like Deontay Wilder is going to fight Andy Ruiz Jr. Anthony Joshua is fighting Dillian White in a couple weeks. So, who's left for Francis? Well, the former baddest man on the planet in the UFC is going to be fighting one of the best boxers in the history of boxing in Abu Dhabi in October, because Francis Le Predateur Ngannou will battle Tyson Fury October 28th in Abu Dhabi. First off, I've had some interesting reactions to this, just personally. I really like Ariel Helwani. He's a fellow Canadian. I support him. However, I feel like he, as a journalist, he's handled this like a publicist for Francis. Like, he's been so openly supporting him. To me, it's been a bit much. And again, I like Ariel. I think Ariel is really good at what he does. I think he's the best MMA content creator. He's the best MMA interviewer in the game. Aaron Bronstedter's not far behind. But it was a little much. It was almost like pushing him. It was like you're in pro wrestling. You're pushing a guy to have this kind of success. Push, push, push. But Francis gets the bag, and he gets a fight against Tyson Fury. Now, my reaction to this is, do people care? Do people care about this boxing match? Because you can sell it as, does it matter? Does this fight mean anything? Because does anybody really believe that Francis Ngannou is going to even be competitive against Tyson Fury? The only way I see this fight being competitive is if Tyson Fury wants it to be competitive. This fight will not be a first round knockout or will not be a second round knockout because Tyson Fury plays with his food. And what I mean by that is, you touch him up. He fought Derek Chisora. Chisora shouldn't be fighting anymore back in February. And that was disgusting. At the end of that fight, Chisora could barely speak. His eye was completely shut. And that was the third time they had fought. Tyson Fury is a great fighter. But Tyson Fury is better at booking fights that he knows he will never lose. Since his fights with Deontay Wilder, he is not taking a risk in his career. He's not fighting Alexander Usyk because they can't agree on terms and he wanted the large sum of money. I get it. You want to make as much money as you can, but also Usyk's a big threat. Usyk's younger than you. Usyk's in better shape, and Usyk is a damn good boxer. Anthony Joshua. Okay, I'm not going to fight him. Okay. I'm going to avoid the landmines. Since those Wilder fights, which were fantastic, by the way, some of the best boxing in the last 10 years, when Fury got knocked down by Wilder with that huge uppercut and he got up, that was theater at its best. But since that third fight, there hasn't been a single thing Tyson Fury has done in the boxing realm that I care about. And that's why the arguments around boxing were, the Jake Paul fights, they're coming in and they're the big rage. People care about them more than actual boxing. Boxing's been really good this year. Haney Lomachenko, what was a fantastic fight. You had Katie Taylor fighting in Dublin, which was great. You had Garcia and Tank Davis. That was awesome. So there's been some really good fights this year. We're going to see Anthony Joshua fight. We're going to see Dubois fight Usyk, which should be fun. But to me, this is Tyson finding his easiest opponent, getting a good bag, because he's going to be fighting in Abu Dhabi, and he's doing Francis a favor. Francis is getting the biggest payday of his career to go fight Tyson Fury and lose. And there is no downside to me for Francis Ngannou. This doesn't hurt his stock with the PFL. He's got a contract. He's fighting there. He's going to be their headliner. He's the face of the promotion. So there's not a loss to him in this event. If he lost an MMA fight to Tyson Fury, sure. But you're going up against Tyson Fury. Nobody expects you to win this. Nobody expects this to be competitive. I don't know. I'm happy that he's going to get a good contract and get paid. Because he didn't make really good money in the UFC. And UFC fighters should be paid more than they are. Because they have a very risky profession that can result in serious injuries and have serious effects on your long-term life. But at the same time, I can look at this and just go, why do I care? Why do I care about this? Like a debate, what's more interesting? Francis Ngannou, Tyson Fury, or Stipe Miocic and John Jones? It's not close to me. I would watch. It's Jones Miocic. I don't care that both guys are past their prime. Both are fighting in their preferred sport. Both are MMA fighters. Francis Ngannou wants to be a boxer. He's not a boxer yet. Tyson Fury is the best boxer of his generation. So you have a guy that's never boxed against the guy who's the best boxer of his generation. If this is a 10-round fight, I'll tell you this right now. If you go on DraftKings, FanDuel, wherever you do your gambling, it'll go longer because Tyson will want it to go longer. He'll touch him with the jab. He'll touch him up, win in points. He can't lose his belt. So it can be a pro bout, but is it a pro bout if you have a champion who's not fighting for his belt? I don't know. To me, it's not that interesting to me. It's not something that excites me. It's not two boxers. It's a former UFC heavyweight champion, now PFL fighter, probably, in 2024 against Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury against Usyk, you got me. Tyson Fury versus Andy Ruiz Jr., you got me. I'll watch it. It's a pro bout. It's a glorified exhibition. It's a glorified exhibition to me. Because Fury can't lose his gold. Ngannou can't lose anything either because he's never boxed. So good on him for getting the green. Good on him for getting the payday. But if it's based on pay-per-view revenue, I don't know how much it's getting. Jake Paul and Nate Diaz will have more pay-per-view buys than that fight. And it's a similar thing, because Nate Diaz isn't a boxer either. But to me, there's more interest in it. There's more interest in the Jake Paul, Nate Diaz, and I'm not going to watch that fight. But a lot of people will. In Dallas next month. But good for Francis. He gets what he wants, proves people wrong. He gets a boxing match. He gets to tell Dana White, I told you so, which is always a good feeling. We could tell a former employer that you're doing better after you left them. You're making more money after you left them. So good for Le Predateur, but I don't know. I hope he's getting his pay up front. That's what I'm telling you. It's not based on revenue. And actually, as we're talking about this, says Jake Paul actually tweeted, Francis Ngannou got 8 figures, not 8 million. Get it right. If he got 8 figures, good for him. Jesus. That's that's awesome for him. If he got 8 figures. And actually, other MMA news as we're talking, Marcel Dorff, who is a breaks MMA news all the time, really great. Follow him on Twitter at Big Marcel 24. Your first fight for UFC 294 in Abu Dhabi is official. Fan favorite Tim Elliott, number 10 ranked flyweight, takes on undefeated top prospect Muhammad Mokaev, number 11, on October 21st. That's a fun fight. Tim Elliott's coming off a win. Muhammad Mokaev had a win in March in London, where he was injured in that fight. He had that knee bar attached to him in the 3rd round, but he's a really fun prospect, a really fun fighter. It's kind of a new generations meeting up with one another. Tim Elliott he's been around a while, Tim Elliott. He would be mid-30s for sure. Tim Elliott's 30 and 36. And Mokaev is 22, I believe, 22 or 23. He is 22. Turned 23 in 2 weeks. But you kind of have the old guard and the new prospect. But that's the first official fight for UFC 294 in Abu Dhabi. Good way to get it going. Another Muslim fighter, as we talked about earlier, on that card. And there's nothing official about that yet. I mean, Islam doesn't have a fight for that yet. We haven't seen him fight since February in Perth. But Volkanovski needs surgery. We think he'll be back, but there's no guarantee yet. Charles says he won't be ready till November or December, so that's out. Poirier, Gaethje, I don't think either of them are getting ready to fight in October. People say, oh, they'll turn it around. It's 3 months. I don't know. I don't think there's a first round finish there unless it's... Again, I watched the first fight this week because there's been no sports on. So I go on Fight Pass. And that was a brutal fight. I mean, Dustin could hardly walk, and he won that fight. His lead leg was beat to hell by Gaethje. So there's not a whole lot official with that card. But you have your first official fight, Mokaev and Tim Elliott. We created this today, folks. All of you and me. Yuri Prohaska, Magomed Ankalaev in Abu Dhabi. But you have back-to-back. You have Abu Dhabi UFC 294, and then the next weekend it's Francis and Tyson Fury in Abu Dhabi. How about that? Dana White's got to book a fight on October 28th. He's got to book something. You know he will. He's so petty. He's got to have some event. I know it's UFC 294, but you got to... Another like Independence Day that he did at T-Mobile just to screw... He'll do something. He'll announce something for that date. He would announce a big Toronto card. Another card in Canada would be fun if he did that on October 28th. A lot of great Canadian fighters in the UFC right now. But that's the UFC roundup for today. A lot of fun stuff. There's always something happening in the sport of MMA. There just is. There's always news. They're doing a really good job so far this summer by just controlling the news, by being in the news all the time, which is smart. They have a card every weekend throughout the summer because, again, there's not a whole lot of content. That's what you do. People are looking for stuff to watch. The movies are on strike. TV shows are on strike. You need to have something on. You got The Ultimate Fighter, Dana White Contender Series is coming back next month. You got a UFC card every weekend. Good on them. Let's pivot to baseball. Baseball returns this evening. And I wanted to look at the World Series odds as we start the second half, because there are some ways to find some good bets here. To find some value. So currently, the Atlanta Braves are the favorite to win the World Series at plus 360. So honestly, even at plus 360 isn't bad. I don't mind that bet. I mean, you're not making huge money, but again, I think it's not a bad way to go about it. But I'm surprised that's the number. That's why I'm a little surprised right now. But that's plus 360, not bad. Tampa Bay Rays fall at plus 450. You have the Dodgers at plus 480. Astros plus 1,000. Texas plus 1,000. The Yankees at plus 1,500. LOL. Minnesota Twins at plus 2,400. The Toronto Blue Jays at plus 2,400. And the Philadelphia Phillies at plus 2,700. So let's talk here. The Atlanta Braves are the best team in baseball. No doubt about it. They had a great first half. Ronald Acuna Jr. might hit 40 homers and get 70 steals. Maybe even get more than 70 steals. And he'll likely win the National League MVP. And they're my pick. I picked them before the season. I think they are the best team. They had a disappointing postseason last year, but they're better than they were last year. But if you're finding value, Minnesota Twins having the same odds as the Toronto Blue Jays is staggering to me. Now, you might say they're up there because you need a team from the American League Central. And in the American League Central, you automatically make the playoffs if you win a division. But that doesn't mean you're going any farther than just the opening round. To me, if you're a Blue Jays fan, if you like to watch the Blue Jays, getting them at plus 2,400 today isn't a bad bet. The Blue Jays are a good team. They are. They got the pitching. They need to add another middle infielder when it comes to just depth. But they're coming together. To be where they are, and I think most people view their first half as disappointing, tells you that they're a very good team. They have better odds right now than the Baltimore Orioles, and the Baltimore Orioles have a 5-game lead on them in the wild card. But looking at the Blue Jays, to me, throwing some scratch on them right now isn't a crazy idea. Because I don't think the Tampa Bay Rays are going to be in the World Series. I just don't. I might be wrong. They've been the best team all season long, but I don't view them that way. Houston is the wild card, pun intended. They have the same odds as Texas, and they're head and shoulder in the National League West, in the American League West. Does Houston's players come back from injury at the right time? Are they aggressive at the trade deadline? What did they decide to do? But to me, the two best teams in the American League are Houston and the Toronto Blue Jays. I said this at the beginning of the year, and I picked Houston because Houston wins clutch games, and the Blue Jays never have. But could the Blue Jays be in the World Series playing against the Atlanta Braves at the end of October? Yes. Yes, I'm not even a Blue Jays fan. I'm not even a homer. I could care less if they win or lose, but could they be there? I do. I absolutely think so. If Vladdy wins the home run derby, if he has a great second half, Bichette batted 317 at the break. Matt Chapman's been pretty good. George Springer's been healthy. That's a major thing. Kiermaier is great defensively in center field. Varsho hits homers and nothing else, but again, he's good in the field. If Alek Manoah can return to form, then you have a secret weapon in the second half that you didn't expect. So, Barrios has been very good. He's got a 3.50 ERA. Getting the Blue Jays or the Phillies, quite frankly, at plus 2,700 isn't bad. I know the Phillies made the World Series last year, but they're on the come up. They're starting to play better baseball. They're getting healthy as well. Looking lower, the Marlins at plus 5,000. They have worse odds to win the World Series than the Padres, which is interesting because the Padres are 6 games out of a wild card, and the Marlins are in the top wild card position. So clearly, odds makers believe San Diego is going to have a good second half, as do I. I do think Miami makes the playoffs. I do think the Padres make the playoffs. So to me, I would just look at this as playoff teams. If you view this team to make the postseason, throw a bet on them because you give them a chance. The Twins, they're not winning the World Series. They can make the playoffs. They're not doing it. I tell you what I would do. Guardians to make the playoffs. That's something I would bet. Just to make the playoffs. You can go on FanDuel right now and look at these odds. Baltimore, minus 340 to make the playoffs. Cubs, no thanks. But you go to the Guardians, you can get them at plus 54, plus 154 to make the postseason right now. Yes, to me. Yes. To me, they're going to make the postseason over the Minnesota Twins. They're a better ball club. Cincinnati, they're a minus 108. You're not getting much money on them. Do you trust the Red Sox? You can get them at plus 255. Wouldn't make that bet, but again, I'm not you. But that's just throwing some advice. New York Mets plus 330, plus 430, pardon me, to make the postseason. Phillies minus 184. You can get the Padres plus 260. I like that bet. Padres are plus 260 to make the postseason. Mariners plus 285. Maybe there's some good bets here to make the postseason. Blue Jays minus 184. But there's some teams, if you like, to me, the Guardians are going to win the American League Central over the Twins. That's just how I'm leaning. But that's a bet that I would look into and that I would make because I think they're better. I think they have more depth. They know how to make the postseason. They do it seemingly every year with low payroll and low expectations. And they just squeak in. And they'll lose, they seem to lose every other year to the Yankees. That happens for them. They'll lose to the Bronx Bombers. But they'll get in. That's the only bet you're making. You're not betting them to make the World Series just to make the postseason, just to play in October. Now, Baltimore might have worse odds than Toronto because they got a brutal second half schedule. I looked it up this morning Baltimore opens with the Marlins for 3. Then they have the Dodgers. Then they go to Tampa for 4. It's a tough stretch of the All-Star break. Then they go to Philadelphia for 3. 3 at home to the Yankees. At the Blue Jays for 4. Weekend series against the Mets. I'm just going through every series here. They don't get an off night. The Orioles. Then they have Houston for 3. Seattle for 3, who will be better in the second half. Tougher series than it looks on paper. San Diego for 3. Oy vey. Then they go to Oakland. They finally get a breather in the middle of August. They get a breather. Good for them. Happy for them. They've they've earned that. Toronto for 3 at home. This is the next month and a half. This is their schedule. All playoff teams are on the cusp. Rockies. There you go. Another break for the Orioles. White Sox. But before those 2 series, they have one series that you'd view as a cakewalk. And that's the Oakland Athletics. Other than that, it's all playoff teams or teams on the verge of being a postseason team. So we'll know what the Baltimore Orioles are in the next month and change. Who they are as a team. Are they a playoff team? Are they a legit contender? Because if they can play 500 baseball in the next month and a half, then they're a very good team. They should be taken seriously in the postseason, but they might expose themselves for being a young baseball team. Their pitching is inadequate, and they might get roughed up by some of these teams. Because the teams that they're going up against have been in the postseason, they have that experience, and they're really good themselves. So we'll see what happens with them. On the opposite side of the spectrum, St. Louis Cardinals. They're not making the World Series. They're not winning their division. They're not making the playoffs. And their president of baseball operations spoke yesterday and said, "We are selling pieces." End quote. Meaning there could be a fire sale in St. Louis. What does that mean? There's some big names in St. Louis. First name that came to mind for me was Nolan Arenado. Nolan Arenado, the best third baseman in baseball. He is signed for another 3 years after this year for $35 million in 2024, $32 million in 2025, he's signed for another 4 years, pardon me. $27 million and then $15 million in 2027. So he's got 4 years left on his deal after this year. But Nolan Arenado is 32. He's still the best third baseman in baseball. He is the heart and soul of the Cardinals. He wanted to go to the Cardinals in free agency, leaving the Colorado Rockies. And he's, this season to date, he's batting .283. He's got 26 walks, 19 overs, 62 RBIs. He's not having he was an all-star on a really bad team. He's still a very productive player. 4 years on a contract makes it wary to take a guy until he's 36. But if you're trying to win, would you take Nolan Arenado? To me, I think yes. The Yankees are going to be aggressive, in my opinion. Yes, they're not in a postseason spot right now. That has fired their hitting coach, and things are in shambles in Gotham City. But would they trade for Nolan Arenado? Yes. Does St. Louis want to shed payroll and kind of burn this down? Do they want to trade Jordan Hicks, who had that awful blunder against the Marlins last week, but otherwise is one of the hardest throwing closers in baseball and would be valued on the open market by teams. Giovanni Gallegos, another pitcher, another relief pitcher that would be coveted around trade deadline time. How about Paul Goldschmidt? Paul Goldschmidt, the multiple-time Gold Glove winning first baseman. Would he be coveted? His contract, he's got 1 year after this one at $22 million. So trading for Paul Goldschmidt at age 35, you get him for 2 cracks at a World Series. Wouldn't make sense for teams like the Toronto Blue Jays or the Tampa Bay Rays, the Los Angeles Dodgers. But the Padres, who like to spend stupid money, would they be interested in Paul Goldschmidt? The Diamondbacks, who are a good team, would they take him back? Unlikely. There's the DH option at his age that a team could use. The Texas Rangers. The Houston Astros would be an interesting team. Paul Goldschmidt just won the MVP of the National League last year, if you recall. Wasn't that long ago that he was at the top of his game. He's batting .284 this season, 15 homers. The power numbers are down. His WAR is down, certainly. But he's still Paul Goldschmidt. He still has some power in that bat. And if you're talking about selling pieces, you want to get good bang for your buck. And when you think about the St. Louis Cardinals, for me, I think about these players. Because Yadier Molina's gone. Adam Wainwright didn't get DFA'd, but basically got DFA'd because they're not going to play him anymore. Jack Flaherty, you have Jordan Hicks, Miles Michaelis, Jordan Montgomery, who they got from the Yankees. Would he have some interest? Andre Palante is a reliever who I think would be coveted on the open market. They just gave Wilson Contreras a big contract. He's not going anywhere. You look, Nolan Gorman, good player. Alec Bergelson, Jordan Walker's their prospect. They hope that can blossom into something. But the names that scream, you can get something for me are Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. Because they're still playing very good baseball. To me, they would be more coveted. They would be a better asset to acquire than Max Scherzer or Justin Verlander from the Mets, because I don't trust either of those guys to be healthy come the postseason. Scherzer's had dead arm the last 2 years, and he hasn't been able to pitch in big games. He couldn't pitch last year in the postseason for the Mets. He had to sit out a start because his arm wasn't good. DeGrom could pitch, and he couldn't. That's what you're talking about, health here. Nolan Arenado plays every day. Paul Goldschmidt plays every day. Neither of those guys have had big injuries histories. These pitchers have, and they're both 40 years old. And Shohei Ohtani will be the talk of the town until the trade deadline's over. Rightfully so. Because he's the best player in baseball, and he's a freak. He does things that nobody else in the league can. But there are other teams out there that will be selling. And there'll be teams looking at these players that they could acquire. I think we see teams right now that are outside looking in. To me, the two teams that scream in each are the Padres and the Mariners. Mariners are 4 games out of the final wildcard spot. They're 6 games out in the American League West. They are not punting. They will not be sellers this season to me. They will be competitive throughout the rest, and it wouldn't surprise me if they make the playoffs. If we get 3 teams out of the American League West in the postseason, I think there's a better chance we get 3 teams out of the American League West and 3 teams out of the American League East. So they could make a splash trade that you wouldn't expect because they're in a position that is, it's shaky currently. The Phillies spend a lot of money. Would they spend more money on a big Cardinals player? Yeah. Probably. Because they got to the World Series last year and they failed. And I don't think that sits well with the people in Philadelphia. Now they might look at pitching, and Alec Baum's been a really good transformation from a third baseman, now playing first. But if the Phillies could have Goldschmidt or Baum as an everyday DH instead of Kyle Schwarber, would they do that instead? Kyle Schwarber's batting 184. Everybody loves Kyle Schwarber. He's got 22 homers in 89 games. The power's still there. I mean, his average is terrible. He batted 218. His last 2 years, he's batted 218, and now he's batting 184 at the All-Star break this year. I don't want that in my lineup every day. He strikes out with the best of them in the league. Milwaukee or Cincinnati, those teams that like to save money, they're both competing for a division title. Who knows with them? San Francisco likes to spend money. They're in a position to make the postseason. Could they use a big trade? Do they kind of need one? Yeah. Yeah, they kind of do. They're having a great year with a team that is kind of a mismatch of guys that you wouldn't expect to be that successful, and credit to them. But I worry about that succeeding for a long period of time over the course of a year. Is this going to work? How long is this sustainable? That's my question with a lot of these teams. Okay, you're spending no money and you're having success. I get it. It's a great story at the beginning. But does it hold up over time? I talked about the Marlins and I talked about the Orioles. Both of these teams have brutal schedules over the next month and change. Let's see what you're made of. Can you keep up your pace? Can you continue to play this good of baseball? Can you stay competitive with the Phillies if you're the Marlins in the NL East? Baltimore, can you stay competitive with the Rays and with the Blue Jays in the American League East? We'll see. The Yankees are coming off a series where they lost to the Cubs. The Cubs stink. Do they need another first baseman in New York? No, I think they like Anthony Rizzo. But Josh Donaldson's batting 152. 152. He has more homers than singles this season. He's got 10 homers, 15 RBIs. I mean, he hits dingers, nothing else. DJ LeMahieu is a converted third baseman because he's no longer playing shortstop because they have Volpe, their prospect, who's playing short. But Volpe doesn't have a great bat. I mean, this team, this is the Yankees. Gleyber Torres, 251. Stanton, 200. Rizzo, 257. Harrison Bader, 257. Josh Donaldson, 152. Billy McKinney, 240. Asdrubal Cabrera, 204. DJ LeMahieu, 220. Volpe, 216. Kyle Hishioka, 239. That's awful. You're not getting anywhere. They can't hit. Arenado can field and he can hit. And I think the Yankees, LeMahieu's 35 too. He's another older player that they have on their roster. I'm going to look up his deal. I remember when they gave it to him, it was a bit, why are you doing this? He is, oh God. He's signed for 4 years after this one. DJ LeMahieu, yoy. He's already 35. I mean, if the Yankees miss the playoffs, Aaron Boone will be fired, and Brian Cashman, as much as they love him in New York, likely will be fired too. Likely will be fired too because it's so many years of not having success. And if you miss the playoffs entirely, and they got a lot of season left, maybe they turn it around. I don't think they're going to make it though. I really don't. But the second half should be fun. The Ohtani trade deadline is the biggest topic of conversation. But the Cardinals, the president, not even the media, the president got us thinking. We're selling pieces. He wants people to call on his players. How big a fire sale is the question? He said we're selling pieces. I jumped to the two biggest names. Maybe it'll just be Jordan Hicks, Giovanni Gallegos, and Nolan Gorman. Good players, not great players. You want to keep the key ingredients of your team. Maybe you want a complete retool in St. Louis. Maybe you look at it and say, we kept it competitive as long as we could with Yachty, with Wainwright, with Albert Pujols. And we did as good a job as we possibly could have, which it's hard to argue that they haven't. If a team is willing to take Nolan Arenado and give us some really good prospects currently, we shed that salary off our roster. Maybe we should. Goldschmidt for one more year won't kill you. But if a team really wants Paul Goldschmidt and they're willing to give you a decent package for him, you consider it, certainly. And Goldschmidt at 35, a competitive guy, I think he'd want to try to win a World Series. He didn't have a whole lot of opportunities in Arizona to do this while he was playing great for a decade. Made the postseason last year in St. Louis. Didn't go all that well. He's going to miss again this year if he goes through the trade deadline as a Cardinal. That's not great. Trade deadline's beginning of August. There will be moves. The next couple weeks are important too because teams will have to decide who they are and where they're going. The Cubs are 7 games back in their own division. They are 6.5 back in the wild card. The Cubs, to me, are not a postseason team. To me, they don't know that about themselves yet, but they'll need to figure that out because I think they'll have pieces people want. Pittsburgh, they know they're not. Washington, Colorado, Oakland, Kansas City, the Angels, they're not going to give up yet. But they I think it was their GMs this morning, direct quote said, we're willing to listen on Shohei Ohtani. We'll take the call. No shit. If I had to gamble, I don't think I don't think he'll be traded. Do I think the smart thing is to trade him? I do. Because I'll take my chances on him coming back and getting a huge haul. Better for him and better for the team. Let's trade you somewhere. You go try to win a World Series. We'll get their best package. When you come back and sign for $600 million, we'll have better prospects on the pipeline to be a competitive team. Win-win. He might decide the win-win is for him to play for the Dodgers and not play for the Angels, but at least they get some prospects back. I don't like losing somebody for nothing. That's my position on that. But baseball starts again this evening. Series this weekend include the Diamondbacks at the Blue Jays, Marlins at the Orioles, Milwaukee and Cincinnati. Dodgers are playing the Metropolitans. Astros at the Angels. So you had some fun series. Padres, Phillies, rematch of last year's National League NLCS in Philly. Yu Darvish against Christopher Sanchez tonight. Marlins, Orioles, you got Sandy Alcantara against Dean Kramer. Milwaukee, Cincinnati, Corbin Burns and Ashcraft. Texas, Cleveland, Aaron Savali against John Gray. Red Sox are at Wrigley. It's always fun. Astros, Angels, JP France, rookie pitcher going up against Shohei Ohtani. Maybe you've heard of him. That's going on tonight. Back to MMA quickly because I'm here on Twitter. Jamahal Hill update. Hill is expected to have surgery on his ruptured Achilles tendon next Monday. Recovery time on any kind of injury can be anywhere between 6 months to a year. Yeah. That's the difficult part. Is it's a brutal injury. It's a brutal injury. It's one of the worst in sports. And it takes a lot to recover from it. But Jamahal Hill's a tough guy. He's been through worse stuff, so I expect him to come back better than ever. But you see this in the NFL, and a lot of guys aren't the same. So we'll see what transpires here in the next little while when it comes to the light heavyweight title, and we'll update you as we know more here on To The Point. History in the CFL. Quickly, last night the Edmonton Elks lost their 20th straight home game, which is history in the making. That is the most in the modern era, the most consecutive home losses at home in the modern era. And I feel bad. Because the Elks are a good football market. They really are. But I want to get this right. I feel like I read that this morning. The team has now lost 20 consecutive home games, tied for the longest streak in North American major sports history with the 1953 St. Louis Browns. Head coach Chris Jones is 4-20. That's right, since taking over. The Elks are 0-6 on the season. They benched their quarterback Taylor Cornelius for the second time in 3 weeks. To me, Chris Jones has to be fired. To me, he's lost that team in the last 2 years. Since coming back from the NFL, it hasn't worked. Simple as that. It hasn't worked, and to me, he's just lost his way. They play again next Thursday in Winnipeg. They're not going to win that game, so they're going to be 0-7. Thankfully, it's not a home game. They play at home July 29th against BC. I don't know. It's tough, but you're 0-6. The crowd hates Chris Jones. It's clear. Now, I never recommend making a decision based off a coach, based off fans. But it's a possibility. To me, it's something they need to consider because you need to have people showing up. The locker room doesn't seem to enjoy Chris Jones. They Kay Loxley who left to go to Hamilton just a few weeks ago because he wouldn't do short yardage duties. But I mean, looking around the CFL is a quarterback problem right now. Jeremiah Masoli is done for the year. Bo Levi Mitchell is hurt for the Tabbies. The Argos are so thankful to have found Chad Kelly. He's the beacon of hope. They're calling him McLeod Bethel Thompson. Doesn't sound like he's coming back. Matthew Schultz isn't a great quarterback for the Tabbies in his own right. Jake Mayer, he's to be determined in Calgary. I like Vernon Adams Jr. But the Elks at 0-6, your season's almost over and it's July. You got a lot of season left. And there's not a lot of hope there. Yes, it turned out to be 37-29 last night, but the game wasn't close. The game was lost in the third quarter, and they got some touchdowns at the end to make it seem competitive. But I mean, it's rough right now in Edmonton. But if I'm running business there, Chris Jones is fired. I'm moving on because he's not helping my team. My players don't like playing for him. Is he fully invested? I don't know. To me, that's to be determined. I don't see a guy that's just completely bought in. And having an interim coach sometimes is just something you do because your season's going terribly. But if you lose against BC on July 29th, you are setting a North American sports record with the most consecutive home losses in a row. 21 in a row. Maybe you don't want that to fall on an interim coach and you'd rather have Chris Jones, and if he loses that game, you fire him after that one, which is 2 games from now. But it's a rough scene in Edmonton right now. And they like the CFL in Edmonton because there's nothing else to do because that city sucks. Sorry, Edmonton, but it's true. But they don't have a whole lot to cheer about right now. We'll see what Dustin Crum is as a CFL quarterback. He makes his debut this weekend. This weekend on the schedule tonight, you have Argonauts and Alouettes. Alouettes got destroyed last week. They'll look for a bounce-back performance. The Argonauts are undefeated. Two-headed monster running game with Alex Ouellette and Andrew Harris and Chad Kelly and a really good defense. Alouettes are a damn good team. The Argonauts are a damn good team. Saturday, you have Blue Bombers at the Red Blacks. And then you follow that with Calgary and Saskatchewan, 2 teams trying to find themselves in the West Division. So that's what's happening this weekend in the CFL. We got the Wimbledon men's and women's finals this weekend. Ons Jabber against Marketa Vondrousova in the women's final tomorrow morning. We will have a new female champion. A new Grand Slam winner will be crowned. Neither woman has won. Both have been in a Grand Slam final. Jabber's been in 2. Vondrousova has been in 1. Jabber was in the Wimbledon final last year and lost, and she makes it all the way back. She's beaten Rybakina. She's beaten Sabalenka. She's battled her way to get here. She's my pick going into tomorrow, but Vondrousova has looked very solid throughout the entire championships. In particular, yesterday against Alina Svitolina, dominating her in very quick fashion. The men's final is set. I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't seen it yet or seen the results, but we are in store for an awesome Wimbledon men's final as well. To me, the 2 best tennis players in the world right now will go head-to-head, so you can't complain about that. NFL. The Jets re-signed Quinnen Williams, one of the best defensive tackles in football, 4 years, $96 million. He gets the bag. They're happy. The Jets have a good defense. C.J. Mosley at linebacker, Quinnen Williams, Carl Lawson, Sauce Gardner. So they get him up. They start their training camp next Wednesday because they play in the Hall of Fame game. It's the earliest game. It's before other teams even open training camps. So they start out next Wednesday. NFL is right around the corner. And on Monday, we have the franchise tag deadline. Guys like Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs have decisions to be made. Can they work out a long-term contract with their respective teams? Those two guys are running backs. It's unlikely that they're going to sign long-term deals because they'll play for $10 million this season. It's unlikely. We'll see. Right now, you got Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard is another guy for the Dallas Cowboys. He's coming off a serious injury. I doubt they're going to give him a long-term deal. It might just be running backs. Let's see here. Trying to find this quickly on Twitter. Saquon Barkley said he considers sitting out week 1, trying to put pressure on the team. Tight end Evan Ingram with the Giants. Running back Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard. Those are the Lamar Jackson came to a deal, so he's no longer Evan Ingram with the Jaguars. He was with the Giants originally. Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard. Yeah, just those 3 running backs. But that's Monday, so there'll be news that day on those players. And if I had to guess, I don't think any of them come to a long-term deal with their respective teams. Maybe Evan Ingram. Maybe the best case, Evan Ingram, because I think Evan Ingram is a good tight end. And I would want to lock him up, I imagine. He wants big money because he sees tight ends around the league making good money. But then you have guys like Mike Gesicki who took $5 million to play in New England. So to catch 22 with that position as well. So that'll be a deadline on Monday. We'll talk about that. Alex Newhook, Keandre Miller signed an extension with the New York Rangers, $3.87 million over 2 years. Love the player. The guy's an absolute stud. Good steal for the Rangers. Tony DeAngelo was bought out from the Philadelphia Flyers this afternoon, so he will become a free agent. Does he end up in Carolina? We'll stay tracked on that, because if he does go to Carolina, why would they trade for Erik Karlsson? I don't know. There's not a whole lot of rumors on the Erik Karlsson front as of right now. But there always could be a shakeup. There always could be a trade. We have salary arbitrations coming up the end of next week in the NHL. We got the Scottish Open this weekend in golf. Currently, Rory McIlroy is leading the tournament at -10. Ben On trails him by 1 stroke, as does Tom Kim. Those will be some early starts. Scotty Scheffler is in the top 10, of course, because he always is. So these guys are playing in the Scottish Open. We'll have the Open Championship, the final major of the year, next week. So you look, Max Homa's is tied for 11th. Wyndham Clark. You have Scotty Scheffler, Sam Burns, Terrell Hatton. So some big names at the top of the leaderboard. Ricky Fowler is 6 under, so he's 4 shots back. Ben On actually shot a 61 yesterday, and he's even par through 15 so far today. So we'll track that this weekend. Baseball is back. You got Wimbledon. We got fights. So lots to chew on this weekend. Hope you guys all enjoy it. Maybe go see Mission Impossible. If you go see Mumford & Sons, if you want to see them in concert, I've seen them. They're phenomenal. Enjoy it. Soak it in. But we'll be back on Monday. Until then, take care. Stay healthy. This is the point.